Hello, everyone. The subject of my speech or lecture or sermon, whatever you want to call it today, is the secrets of holiness and happiness. Holiness and happiness are one and the same thing. When you're holy, you're happy. And in order to be happy, get holy, become holy, or get into the consciousness, what's called the perfect state of consciousness. The happiest I have ever been in my life, I've mentioned it before, the happiest I've ever been was 1981. Late, towards the middle and towards later 1981. I took off from work. Once in a while, several times in my life, I've taken off work and I have lived, very, very poor because I don't have any cushion, or didn't then, had no money in the bank to speak of, no big cushion, a little bit, not much. Most I ever had in the bank was $1,500 until I was middle-aged and started my own business. Then I became relatively affluent. But happiness, what is happiness? God is happiness. How do you have God? Whatever it takes to have God in your life is what will bring happiness into your life. And whatever pushes God out of your life or farther from you will be the unhappiest you've ever been. This I tell you from experience, not from reading books or reading anything or studying anything or listening to any preacher, simply living. By living, I know what happiness is. And by the way, I have seen God face to face twice. I have seen hell once. When people die, they go to heaven. Now, you've maybe, like I have, you've seen some of the near-death experience podcasts. The near-death experience are people who, some of them, have seen God face to face. They've been in the other side. They've been in heaven. They know what heaven is. And they speak of the overwhelming joy, overwhelming happiness, absolutely overwhelming. They didn't many of them didn't want to come back, but they had to come back. Because it wasn't their time, or else God gave them a choice, and God said to them, look, if you don't go back, this is what will happen with your family. And God showed this one particular lady how her son would suffer and her daughter would suffer, that their lives would not be as good as they would have been had she gone back and lived. So because of that, she says, oh, okay, I make the choice, that lady. I make the choice, I go back. Some people have to come back because there's no choice. You have to go back. It's not your time. That happens. I remember seeing a thing about a guy, and he saw his dogs in heaven running in a mob, a pack. And they were running, and his particular dog looked at him and said, you shouldn't be here, meaning it wasn't his time. And then he just ran off with the other dogs. Yes, I want to see all my animals in heaven. I want to see not just the pets, but all the wild animals I have saved and helped and fed and everything. Okay, holiness and happiness. What is happiness? When a person goes to heaven, what happens? What is their mental state? I have a man I was in love with, and he became my husband, my spiritual husband, and he's united to me. I'm united to 7 different men spiritually as husbands. 7. I have 7 husbands. Spiritual. They're all saints. Jesus is one of them. Saint Charbel is another one. Sri Kaleshwar is another one. Shirdi Sai Baba is another one. Bhagwan Nityananda. Nityananda is another one. I got them written down somewhere. I can't remember all their names just to rattle them off. 7 of them. I have to think. Now I lost my train of thought. See, now I was thinking, wow, what was my train of thought? So what is this? So they're all saints except one is not a saint. He's just an ordinary guy. And I was in love with him, very much so. And he died of a drug overdose. And I told him before he died, as soon as you die, if you die first, you will be united to me while I'm still alive. If I die first, we'll be united no matter what. I told him. I told him already because we were spiritually married. I knew we were. Okay, so as soon as he died, I said, well, tell me what you're feeling. You want to be with your gangbangers again, doing drugs? What do you feel? He said, I feel no desire, no compulsion for anything except just to be alive. I have no desires of the earth or the flesh. I am free. I don't desire people. I'm with you, and you're with God. So I'm with God because I'm with you. I don't desire drugs. Before it was a compulsion. The drugs were a compulsion. I had to have the drugs. And every day my life revolved around the drug. I had to have that drug. If I didn't have it, I couldn't function. I wanted to kill myself. If I gave in to the feeling of depression and negativity that I was in, but the drugs kept me going, he says, because he was abused. You know, a lot of people that are abused get on drugs or alcohol or something negative. It happens, not with everybody. I was abused, but I never became a drug addict. Mentally abused. Mentally, not physically. Not sexually, I meant to say. Physically, mentally, emotionally, yes. By my mom mostly and other people. But different people react differently to different kinds of abuse. And again, abuse is not all the same. Some is worse than others. Some is devastating. Some is more destructive. There's all different kinds. And you got different individuals who react differently to different types of stress, you know. So you can't judge. You can't judge anything like that. You can't judge people for why they became alcoholics or drug addicts because of abuse. Some people did, some people didn't. It depends how bad it was. And this person, Nick, that I'm talking about, his was horrendous. Horrendous sexual abuse. Horrendous. Very serious sexual abuse. Okay, so so he said, I have no desires. I don't want to go anywhere. I'm perfectly happy. He says, I don't need to see anyone. I'm perfectly happy. He says, I'm not lonely because I'm with you and God, because you're with God and I haven't reached that state yet. But now that I'm with you, I'm also in your God state. He said, but I'm also in your sufferings. He says, so part of me is in that purgatory you told me about, and part of me is with God, just like you're partially on earth suffering, and that's your purgatory. And part of you, and part of the time you're with God and you're happy. So part of the time I'm happy, part of the time I'm in purgatory. And I remember one time I had a dream, and Jesus appeared to me. And Jesus showed me from 3 different sides bears coming towards me. And I was in a little house that was a dwelling, that was a residence of this man, this middle-aged, older middle-aged man, like a man in his 50s or something. And I was there. I pulled in with a truck with my now spiritual husband, Nick. I pulled in. He was driving the pickup truck, and we pulled into the driveway. It was autumn. There were golden leaves everywhere. And I was just enjoying the ambiance. And oh, then Jesus showed me, the man came out of the house. And I said, oh, there's a man in the house. Somebody owns this house. But I don't know who it was. And I don't know him or anything, but I was just enjoying his property. And he came out. He was very nice to me. And he showed me that way a bear came, a red bear, and that way a gray bear, and that way a brown bear came. And I knew bears represent sufferings. I knew Jesus was predicting that by his grace he was going to give me multiple sufferings. And then I saw Nick. He was in the pickup truck, but he was like hiding behind a tire. And I called him. I said, get out from behind that tire. What's going on? And at first, I didn't analyze it. And it took me a long, long time. And I had already written the meaning of the dream, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing behind the tire. And even after I published it in a book, I figured out, wow, what was that? I figured out what the tire was. The tire represents travel, motion, going somewhere. He wanted to exit. He wanted to hide. He wanted to leave. He wanted to leave the premises. He wanted to leave where I was going to be at, because I was going to be suffering, and he would suffer with me. So the tire was a symbol of motion. Tire takes you. You get in a car, your tires take you somewhere. You get in a wagon, the tires take you somewhere. So he wanted to get out of the suffering. So he's both suffering. Part of the time he's suffering with me, and part of the time he's happy and in a more godly state with me. So heaven, what happens in heaven? Heaven, you don't have any more desires. You don't have any more anxieties. You don't have any more depression. You don't have any more fear. It's all gone. The fear is gone. The depression, the anxiety. Because in the world, and all the people who had NDE experiences that I've seen, on the Alex Ferrari show, many of them said the world is a testing ground. It is really a tough, tough place. And they said there are other dimensions. There are other dimensions. And they say the few people who knew about the other dimensions, not all of them talked about the other dimensions, but they say that the earth is the toughest. Our planet is the toughest of all the dimensions. It is the hardest. We suffer. The Catholics always call this, where we are, the valley of tears. Yes, I walk through the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. We have fears. We have regrets. We have regrets. We have brokenheartedness. We have sickness. We have loneliness. We're lonely because God is not with us most of the time. Once in a while, God comes closer to us, and that's called the time of consolation. Consolation. That's when God comes nearer to us. I'm going to talk about two states, one where I was very, very happy and one where I was very, very unhappy. The happiest state I recall ever being in had nothing to do with having the things of the world or people loving me or my boyfriend telling me he loved me at the time years ago. There was this particular guy I'm talking about. That was not the happiest I've ever been. The happiest I've ever been was 1981. I began to explain it, 1981. Not in the beginning of 81 because I was doing something else, but as the year moved on, I had a feeling I had to be alone. I've got to be alone. And I told all my friends and relatives, there weren't many I was in touch with constantly, but the ones I was in touch with a lot, I told them all, do not write to me, please. Please do not call me. Just don't think about me right now. I need to be alone. I felt a need to be alone with God. And they all complied. They of course misunderstood. They took it personally, some of them. They didn't understand what I was doing, and they thought I just didn't want to bother with them as an individual. They thought it was a personal thing. It wasn't. It was absolutely not a personal thing. Okay, so I began praying and praying and praying every day, all day. And I had visions. The Holy Virgin, Jesus appeared to me. The Holy Virgin appeared to me. The Holy Virgin appeared to me and began bringing me souls in purgatory. The first one she brought me was an infant. And she said, will you take care of this infant? Without knowing the identity or anything of this person. I thought it was an infant, a child. I said, yes. Yes, I will. Of course I will. And he was in a crib. And then that night, he appeared to me. He was not an infant. He was Errol Flynn, the movie star, the notorious movie star. He had already been in purgatory for 24 years in 1981. And Mother Mary gave me him as a client. And for the next 3 months, every day he and I were in touch. We spoke to each other. I could speak to him, he would speak to me. And I saw his sufferings. And at one point I started reading the Bible to him. He was so inspired by me reading the Bible to him. He got all worked up and he wanted to dictate his life to me. And I wrote it all down. Every word that he said, I wrote it down. And it's all in my book, Theater of Justice, Celebrity Souls Appear. He's one of them. I have him and Anna Nicole Smith on the cover. Anna Nicole Smith was also my client in purgatory. I helped her as well. And he was the first celebrity, big celebrity. I helped many others, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Elvis Presley, George C. Scott, Rudolph Nureyev, Robert Atkins, the diet doctor, Timothy McVeigh, the terrorist. Can't remember offhand who else, but maybe that's it. And Anna Nicole Smith and Errol Flynn. And I have, like I said, a book, Theater of Justice, Celebrity Souls Appear, where I give the details. I give the dates, when they died, when they appear to me, and when they ascended into heaven. Richard Pryor appeared to me in those days, but he was still in purgatory. I didn't see him at that time ascend. He's ascended since then. And Anthony Quinn also appeared to me, but he had not yet ascended. He has ascended. Anthony Quinn has ascended. He was in there for 17 years. That's a long stretch. But not as long as Errol Flynn, and not as long as my mom. My mom was in for 25 years. My first husband was in for 55 years. My second husband he was a good guy. He was in for only about 9 months. Anna Nicole was only in for like 3 months, which was very good, very short. But we'll get into that another time. I'll present the book and talk about the book. So what is happiness? And why was I happy at this time? So now I have a mission to the souls of purgatory. I'm not working, so I'm not seeing all the guys, the lustful men that just think about my body and wanted my body and all that. I wasn't working. I wasn't dancing. I was a dancer. And I'm going to the Holy Church every day, receiving Holy Communion. It was the Annunciation Church in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a Lithuanian church. And all I did was pray, think about God, pray. I even sang. I used to get so bored. Not bored, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I had so much time on my hands. that I used to sing. I used to make up songs to God and sing. And I remember somebody in the hall must have heard me, because I heard a kid start imitating me and singing what sounded like they were singing like religious songs. And I was in absolute, total, complete happiness. And I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't speak to anyone. See, whenever I spoke to people, they would bring me in back into the world. You know, Saint Benedict, he's called the father of monasticism. He was a hermit, and then the guys came to him and wanted to have him as their spiritual director, and they convinced him to start a monastery, which he did. And so he lived with them in the group, you know, in a monastery. And some of the monks had to go and get provisions, like, you know, food and whatever that they had to do. They had to get some supplies. And when they would come back, they would gossip. They would tell the guys what was happening in the world. And Saint Benedict corrected them. And he said, look, we are here because we left the world. Do not bring the world back in to the monastery. Do not bring the world back in here. And that's a lesson I shall never forget. So as long as nobody contacted me, I was with God in a perfect sense. In a perfect sense, I wasn't in heaven, but I was in a quasi-heaven, as close to heaven as I could get. And that's happiness. When you have God with you, that's happiness. And I remember I had one phone call that I picked up. It was from somebody that didn't know I wanted to be alone. And for some reason, I picked up the phone. I should have not picked it up. And he wasn't a bad guy. He was a good guy. He was a producer, sort of a technician at a TV station. And we had a discussion about something. And that ruined my whole day, because he brought the world back into my premises. He brought the world back to me. And my mind was no longer pure. My heart and my mind remembered the world. My heart remembered the feelings of the world. I was no longer, that day was ruined. That one 20-minute phone call, or whatever, 10 minutes maybe, I don't remember. It was short, not too long, not too short. It ruined my whole day. It took me a while to get back into the emptiness. The emptiness where only God and I dwelt, and the souls in purgatory, and going to church. That was the happiest I've ever been. This heavenly state ended. It ended because something terrible, not terrible physically, but something spiritually terrible happened. I prayed for the divine, not knowing what I was praying for. Be careful what you pray for. Well, I'm not sorry about it. I'm not sorry. I prayed for the divine stigmata, and I received it. And it was the most devastating experience of my life. And to pay for the grace, I was in a dark night of the soul for 18 years. It was happened in October 9th, the beginning of it, October 9th, 1982. So I was in heaven until a little bit before October 9th, 1982. And then I went into the worst dark night of the soul imaginable. And it was so devastating that I looked in a mirror and I knew I had gone temporarily insane. That's how devastating it was. The interior, mind you, it's not the exterior divine stigmata where St. Francis and all those, Padre Pio and Teresa Newman and others had the physical wounds. But you can have an interior stigmata on the heart. It's psychological, spiritual, mental, emotional. And many saints have had that interior stigmata. Saint Faustina, it's said in books. I didn't get to the part in her book. I'm reading her book now. I didn't get to the part yet where she explains it, if she explains it. Saint Gertrude the Great had the interior stigmata. Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa of Avila, and other saints had the interior, but they didn't show the wounds. And that's the kind I have, the interior. So after I received it, that was the end of my heaven, because it is just the end of my heaven at that time. All right, so now, okay, so then I was in this state for 18 years where I could get no consolation from God. I could, and the Dark Night is well documented by Saint John of the Cross. He explains it. It's hard to understand him though, but um, Mother Teresa, the great Lady of Calcutta, she was in a dark night of the soul. She must have had the interior stigmata. She was in a dark night of the soul most of her adult life. It was explained by Father Groeschel, NEWTN. He said that she told her confessor how horrible it was. She said, I try to pray and I feel like heaven returns my prayers with daggers coming down from heaven at me. And that's what happens when you're in a bad, dark night of the soul. You could pray and pray and pray, and you don't feel God's presence. You don't feel that God is hearing you. You don't feel God is close to you. You don't feel the presence of God. That's the dark night of the soul. So I was in this dark night, but you can't sin. Mind you, it's a test from God. Just because you don't feel God's... See, when you feel God's presence, you're like, oh man, I can do anything. I'm great. I feel so good. I feel holy. I feel sanctified. I can conquer the world. I can do miracles with my faith, with my love. And then you go in the dark night of the soul. You don't feel any love. Supernatural love. You don't feel any love. I didn't. It was like burnt out of me. Something burnt it out. My chakras got burnt. My heart chakra, from the Sahasrara to the heart chakra, they all got burnt out from the pain that I went through on October the 9th. The pain was so bad that I looked in a mirror and I said, I have gone insane. I hoped it was temporary. It was temporary. It lasted about 2 or 3 days and then it went away. But I was temporarily insane from trauma. That's how bad the trauma was. But then you go into this, you're burned out. Your chakras are burnt out. I explain it in my book on the attainment of the divine stigmata. And I explained that the stigmata is martyrdom. Martyrdom. You are martyred. You lose everything you love, which is God. What else could there be that's more important than God? What profit a woman if she gained the whole world, but she loses her soul? It's like you lost your soul. You're not connected to God anymore. You're disconnected. And it's darkness, spiritual darkness. You don't feel any. See, when you have God's presence, you feel like Superwoman, Mighty Woman, Wonder Woman, or Superman, or Batman, or Captain Marvel. Oh, like Peter said when he had the consolation of Jesus, I'll go with you anywhere, even to death. Yeah, me, I'll do anything, because Jesus was with him. Everything was going well. And Jesus said, before the cock crows this morning, you will have denied me 3 times. See, because that's when Jesus was gone. See? So when God is gone, now that's a test. When God is gone, you cannot sin. I was celibate. I could not break my vow of celibacy. I kept it. Kept it from until God appeared to me. That'll be the next anecdote I tell you, when God appeared to me and told me to quit. That was traumatic too. So the dark night of the soul is like you're in a purgatory, but it's a test of your faith, because God takes away everything but your faith. You understand me? You still have you have to have your faith. Okay, God isn't with me, but I'm not going to give up my faith, my belief in God. I don't know what God is doing, but I had a vague idea that it had to do with the stigmata. I had an idea, but I didn't know how long this darkness would last. I didn't know. But it lasted for 18 years, and then all of a sudden, I was studying this Hindu guru named Muktananda, and all of a sudden the light started to come back, the light of God, the presence of God started to come back to me while I was doing a sadhana. Sadhana is a devotion to him, Muktananda. And then he started appearing to me in light. He says coruscating violet lights. And I would sit on my bed and pray. I put all the lights out. It was pitch dark. And then I would see these coruscating violet lights. That's how he communicates. He's got these. He explained it in his book. He's got these coruscated violet lights, and that happened every night. The first time he appeared to me, he stooped down and he gave me a gift, a pair of sandals made. They had red, white, and blue decoration. Yeah, red, white, and blue. America's colors with stars. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I just thought about it later. He was giving me the guru sandals right away in the first vision we had. He gave me his guru sandals. When the guru gives you your sandals, you walk in their footsteps. They're giving you something of themselves, a mantle. Like his guru was Bhagwan Nityananda, and Bhagwan gave him a pair of sandals, which Baba Muktananda carried on his head, he said, and he was walking on air, because Bhagwan Nityananda anointed him and gave him, through his eyes, his lights went from Nityananda's eyes into Muktananda's eyes, lights. And he was like, da. This was going on for a while. Nityananda putting the light of God, the anointing, into Muktananda through the eyes. And then Nityananda gave him, like I said, the sandals. The sandals are a symbol of you are now anointed by your guru and you're going to walk in your guru's sandals. So I didn't realize that he gave me the sandals on the first night he appeared to me. And they were red, white, and blue because he loved Americans, because Americans made him a big star and gave him everything he had, built him his ashram and made him a millionaire. Not that he was greedy, but he built this, this whole thing, this whole ashram and everything. And it was more than just one ashram. He had more than one, and then later they developed more. But yeah, he didn't live terribly long after that. He died. But so I fulfilled my sadhana with him, my devotion to him, and he gave me multiple gifts. It was wonderful. Okay, so then I came out of this dark night, and little by little my happiness came back because God was consoling me again. But then after a while, something happened that made me extremely unhappy. After 30 years of celibacy, God appeared to me for the third time and said, "Do I want to get out of my celibacy?" And I said, "No," because God had asked me twice before, did I want to get out of my celibacy? It's done its work, because it had killed the lust, the sexual desire that I have, and the connection in that sense, with the world of sex and the world of, looking at men sexually instead of as brothers. So I had killed all that. I had got over it. I had risen above it. That's why you become celibate, to rise above your own flesh. It's not because sex is a sin. People misunderstand that. They think that saints and hermits and those who want to be close to God do so because sex is a sin. They get celibate because sex is wrong. It's not. And I didn't know then because I was brainwashed by the Catholic Church. I didn't know if sex was a sin or not. I was confused. It took me a while to break out of that brainwashing, but I broke out of it finally, thank God. But they do it so to rise above the flesh. That's the main reason. It's not about sin. It's about abstracting yourself from your neediness, and that's why they fast. They don't eat much because they want to break that hold that food has. The gluttony, the food, and people that eat a lot. If you give in to your food, you're giving into your flesh. So they fast in order to control that other part of themselves, not because eating food is a sin. Of course, gluttony is a sin, but not because eating average food or normal food is a sin. It's not. But they're trying to conquer the flesh. So, because of that, that's why they fast. So, they're also celibate because it's a type of depriving yourself of a sexual release until you conquer it. You conquer that, and you also conquer your appetite. So I've conquered my appetite now again because I had gained some weight and now I have lost it because I've been fasting for 11 months pretty strongly, and I'm almost where I want to be with that. But it wasn't because of any particular reason, because I just wanted to lose the weight. It wasn't a religious thing. But anyway, so God said to me, I want you to quit the celibacy now, and if you don't do it this time, you'll be outside the will of God. So of course I had to obey. God wanted me to go out and have fun and have sex, and so for 11 years I became a cougar. Now, have you ever seen Twilight Zone? In the Twilight Zone, there's a story of this guy. He was a criminal. He was a bad criminal. And he had just robbed something like a bank or a store or something, and he was climbing up this wall, and a cop came and shot him, and he fell down dead. And when he woke up, he saw white shoes and a man in a white suit standing there. It was the actor. His name is Sebastian Cabot. I don't know. I don't remember who the criminal guy was, but the man in white was Sebastian Cabot. So he wakes up, and Sebastian Cabot took him to a 5-star hotel where he could have anything he wanted. And what he wanted was women, wine, women, and song. He wanted women, beautiful women dressed in evening gowns, made up with fancy hairdos, jewelry, evening gowns. He wanted to gamble. I guess he was womanizing. They didn't show that, but I guess he was doing sex. And every day he drank and gambled, and drank and gambled and womanized, drank, gambled, and womanized. And after a while, Sebastian Cabot provided everything he wanted and needed. So one day he said, I'm getting bored. I want to rob a bank. So Sebastian Cabot arranged this whole scenario for him to rob a bank. So we robbed a bank. And then he came back to this 5-star hotel. And then he said, you know what? I'm getting bored again. I want to get out of here. He says, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. He says, I should have gone to the other place. And then he tried a door, and the door, he couldn't open it. The door wouldn't open. The knob wouldn't open. He tried it, it wouldn't open. The door wouldn't open. And Sebastian Cabot laughed and he said, ha, 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 ha. This is the other place. So I became a cougar. I drank. I went downtown every weekend with college kids and locals, wine and dining, sex. Different young men wanted to have sex with me almost every weekend for a while. I just had a variety, and then I fell in love with one guy. Then I didn't want to do it with the other guys, but I only saw him once in a while. He he had a drug addict enabler that he was with a lot, so he didn't see me as much as I wanted to see him. It was miserable. To make a long story short, I'm not going to go into the details today, but another time I will give you maybe more details. But to cap it off, this is the other place. This was the other place. This was one of the most miserable 11 years of my life. When I drank, had sex with multiple partners, fell in love, things weren't perfect, I had lust, I had jealousy, all my human failures, my human faults and sins came back because it's the human state. When you're drinking and hanging with people, all of that comes back and all of the peace of mind goes away. The consolation, the intimacy with God leaves you, and the world comes back in the desires of the flesh. I thought I couldn't have fun anymore unless I was drinking. I was drinking most of the time, a lot, not always. Sometimes I would quit for a year or two. I did, like a couple times I quit drinking, but I was still hanging out with everybody, carousing, whooping it up. But was I having fun? I thought I was sometimes, and sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I knew I was miserable, but it was a different kind of misery. It was a misery of the way humans are, because people don't treat you right, or they hurt your feelings, or they put you down, or they insult you. It was that kind of torture because I was in my human self again. And my human self is a torturous state. And then the sex wasn't great. I mean, it was nothing to write home about. But the only sex that was wonderful was the guy I was in love with, that I fell in love with. But everything went wrong with him. Things were horrible. It led me to heart attacks. I began to have anxiety attacks, and then they turned into heart attacks. And that was the beginning of the end. I had several heart attacks. They don't know how many. But I had several heart attacks. By the time when I went to the hospital, I didn't even know I had heart attacks. I thought they were anxiety attacks. So when I went to the hospital, they examined me carefully, and they said, "We have a bed for you. You're not leaving. You've had multiple heart attacks." Huh? I didn't even know it. I had all the symptoms and the pains and everything, but I thought they were anxiety attacks. It was incredibly painful, so painful that I knew if it got any worse, it would pass out. I would pass out, but I didn't pass out. Not that I know of, unless I passed out and came back. So maybe I did, because God told me I did die one time, but I came back. So the happiest I've ever been was when I was alone with God. The world left me. People left me. All I did was pray, communicate with souls in purgatory, sing songs to God, go to church every day. I don't remember what else I did. I think I read literature, religious literature, I think. I don't remember that far too well. But I remember being happy, wanting nothing but God, needing nothing but God. No people, no misery, peace of mind, peace, peace, peace. But then I had no money, and I had the dark night of the soul, and I had to go back to work. And that ended my happiness. And then I was happy again after the recovery from the stigmata. I was happy again. And then God told me I had to go out and be a cougar. And I'm going to analyze why in another podcast, why God made me do that. Because God will never make you do anything bad or wrong. And I think it was because God wanted me to show an example to other women over my life story. My life story: woman, be free. Woman, go out, have fun. Old woman, young man, go out and have fun. Have sex with young men. Stop knitting. Stop sitting there. Stop just watching your grandchildren and being in the nursery planting plants and picking roses and cutting flowers and making bouquets and knitting and going to bingo and doing all the old things old women do. Go out and have fun with young men. You deserve to have fun. You're not over the hill. You're not finished. Young men like old women. They want a mother. The middle-aged men don't. When men get to be 35, 40, they want college-age girls. They want young girls. And the men I met downtown that were middle-aged, they weren't interested in me. They wouldn't give me the time of day. They wanted the college girls. It's a college town. They wanted college girls. They didn't want me. But the college boys wanted me. See, young men, they're first fall in love with their own mom and their mom's friends. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that's normal and natural. Normal and natural. All right, I'm going to quit this. I'm going to turn this off in a second. Be at peace. Go with God. Try not to worry and have anxiety. Put first the kingdom of God, and everything shall be added unto you. Don't be depressed. Don't be anxious. Trust God. Believe in God. Love God. And everything shall be added unto you. Amen. We'll see you next time.